I'm going to talk about something that most of you, I think, already know something about, and that's the internet. And I'm going to talk about something you also know something about, but may have some misgivings about. That's social media. The thing about social media, it is indispensable. It is everywhere. It is ubiquitous. It's the way in which we communicate with each other, and yet so many of us have misgivings. I'm going to try to talk about a way for us to think through what social media is for us in 2025. And to do that, I'm going to offer an origin story that is not about 1776, and this is not Hamilton. It's about the mid-1990s when the commercial internet is deployed. Congress funds it. It is privatized. Al Gore actually has a role to play. The Senate is important. But what happens after 1995 is extraordinary, right? An explosion of community websites. Not really websites, actually. The web is an emergent thing. But community bulletin boards, electronic bulletin boards, chat rooms, all of this is emerging, and alongside is a new vision about what is possible because the technology is so extraordinary. Nothing had really existed before. Again, you know this story. One of the things that people start talking about is the transformative potential for politics, economics, all of social life. And that is because apparently we don't have to rely on the traditional conventions of governing ourselves. The internet will help us do it ourselves. You have a vocabulary that emerges at this time, user empowerment. User empowerment. I don't know how many of you know who John Perry Barlow is. This is a quote from him. He's often associated with the Grateful Dead. He passed away a couple years ago. Maybe a poet laureate for the Grateful Dead. Is also writes quite a bit about the internet, an early vanguard thinker about the internet. And he penned something called the Declaration of the Independence of Cyberspace, because Congress is thinking about regulating the internet. And he says, Congress, the internet is special. We are governing ourselves. You're just an industrial space. We govern ourselves. We are empowered to do things ourselves. In fact, you can write laws that will never reach us. This is a combination of tech solutionism and cyber libertarianism, what some of us might associate with tech libertarianism. It's powerful. People governing themselves, deciding for themselves. The language that he uses is language that continues to govern how many people think about this. Indeed, the Supreme Court and Congress adopt this view. First, in the context of the First Amendment. There's a big case involving AOL. I don't know if anyone knows America Online is. 1997, it says, people are pamphleteers on the internet, and Congress, if you're going to try to regulate this stuff, you got to be careful. And they strike down a bunch of things that Congress tries to regulate to protect children from pornography, to be clear, but it's too close to regulating content. Congress does something else. That's the Supreme Court. In 1996, Congress passes a statute that says that intermediaries, online sites, interactive computer services, cannot be held accountable for the information that passes through them, associated with the Communications Decency Act. It's colloquially called Section 230. These are the foundations of what comes next. The internet explodes soon afterwards. Now, there's a tech bust in late 1990s, early 2000s, but soon after that, social media really hit the spot. Facebook, you all know, started 2004, but the real innovation is the news feed, 2006. And the news feed personalizes information to everybody. This is a powerful thing because not only can you deliver content to people directly based on the information they share, irrespective of anything else, you can attach attachment. You can have advertisements alongside the information. This proves to be a very generative, lucrative business model. But personalization on the newsfeed is powerful and contagious. There are a variety of different platforms that emerge, and they're starting to call themselves platforms. And all of what they do is so arresting, so engaging, that people can't stop. in fact, when the newsfeed gets launched in 2006, some of you remember this, many people had some misgivings, actually. It's a little freaky, a little creepy. You mean you know that I want to hear this information or see this information? Even in spite of that, people keep coming back. It's a lucrative line of business. My daughter is a junior in college, and I want to underscore how important this invention has been. She and I, we talk about some things, but some things she doesn't talk to me about anymore. It makes me sad. But we do communicate about things online. It's a way of connecting, and it's personalized the way we live our lives together. One example I like to share is this Noel Robinson influencer. I don't know how many of you know him. He's a dancer based out of Munich. He has a huge afro that he hides under a hat and approaches random strangers out of nowhere and starts dancing. He takes his hat off, the huge afro comes out, and people giggle and laugh. The most notable one is where he approaches a police officer in Mumbai, and the police officer looks menacing but can't resist and starts dancing along. This is the happy story. This is what the internet affords, and my daughter and I get to share this information. There's a lot going on here that wouldn't have otherwise happened but for this capacity. Government is not involved. But there is another side, and many of you are familiar with this. So much of this, because of the protection from the 1990s, is opaque and unknown. Companies invoke these protections under the First Amendment and Section 230 because they don't ever want the ways in which information gets delivered to be understood. In fact, the argument is governments, industrial institutions of the past do not understand what we do. Users govern themselves. This logic remains. In fact, last year, the Supreme Court decided a case that underscored this point 30 years later. Platforms are free speech speakers, are free speech entities. They get to speak as they wish, and they are immune for the most part. The books I showed a moment ago are building out a theory for why this is insufficient. This is opaque and not understood, but it's causing social harms. There are effects that are never really measured because we never know what the impact these companies have with the distribution of information. They're driven by keeping people's attention, you know that, keeping it engaging, but on the other hand, collecting information, delivering information, sometimes delivering harmful information. I too have written about some of this, drawing on this research. And the basic ideas I want to point out without lingering too much is that sometimes platforms in the delivery of content deliver discriminatory content. That is, they deliver some content to some people and not other content not to others, but sometimes that information is consequential, like a job opportunity or an employment opportunity. And as it turns out, there may be violations of civil rights laws, cases I've been involved in. Sometimes the collection practices are confusing. We consent to it all, but we don't really understand what they're collecting or what they're doing with it. This, too, is not really clear. It is opaque. What is driving this power? It is an interest in delivering advertisements. This, too, you know. But sometimes these advertisements, sometimes the content can be harmful. But these companies, again, are never held accountable for it. Advertisers keep coming back, though. U.S. companies spent over $200 billion on advertising and social media in the last year. This is an alternative way to think about what these companies are. They are not pure speech platforms. In fact, they're not speech platforms at all. They are engines for holding attention. And the way they do that is by deploying all kind of trick, the endless scroll, autoplay, any number of design tricks that keep attention. Now, I understand that this is a bit uncomfortable. Again, this is the weird misgiving, right? We are so drawn to it, and yet there is something at work that feels uneasy. The ad tech drives a lot of this. And I mention this because this suggests a solution. It suggests that maybe if we don't think about these entities as speech platforms, if we think of them as part of an industrial process for the delivery of advertisements, to hold people's attention, they start sounding more like other things that we regulate. I mention this because there is no other industry that is so protected under law than online businesses, given the First Amendment and Section 230. The ways in which I and others have written that we think about this is to think about this as an industrial process. The reason this is important because then we start talking about content as such. You start talking about content, then you raise First Amendment problems, raise First Amendment questions. If you talk about this as an industrial process, as about holding attention or addiction, it starts looking a little different. And this is what is emerging. We're seeing this in cases and in many legislatures around the country and states, not really Congress. Congress is not really doing too much. Addiction. In fact, there's a judge just a month ago in a lawsuit involving children whose parents are alleging are too addicted to get schoolwork done, too addicted to do just about anything, resemble tobacco. It's more like tweaking the ways in which they attend to what's on the screen, on their displays, rather than engaging in conversation in the way we might assume. And we're seeing a lot of these claims pop up. This is an industrial design problem. It is not a speech problem. Now, there are two cases I want to draw your attention to. One, they both involve TikTok. One you probably know about, and that is the TikTok ban. How many of you heard about the TikTok ban, right? This statute that Congress passed last year that the current president has delayed its implementation on the basis that the Congress wanted China to divest from from TikTok, the owner of ByteDance. The reason is important here. The Supreme Court, in evaluating the case in January, decided that Congress could regulate this, even though it involves speech, because it is not speech addressed. It's about data collection and extraction and danger in a national security setting. It's not about speech. It's about industrial process of collecting information. The other case is a sad case, also involving TikTok. It emerges out of Pennsylvania. 10-year-old girl gets drawn to the blackout challenge. How many of you know what the blackout challenge is? It's this thing, a meme online, where people go to the very limits of strangulating themselves. 10-year-old girl does what we hope she wouldn't do and passes away and dies. Her mother brings a case. TikTok says, you can't blame us. This is information that passes just through our system. It's content from other people. But of course, this can't be right. They are delivering this content on a feed that is called for you. It is designed to do this. This is not speech. This is an industrial process for holding attention. The courts are entertaining these cases. The tide has turned. Industrial process, not speech. There's a lot of other things we can think about in this context, too. I like to talk about data protection as content moderation law. That is, if we can limit the ways in which companies collect information and how they collect it and how frequently they do, we might actually slow down the pace at which they tend to delivering ads, make people happy. We might also think about these companies as too big. Maybe it's time to siphon off the different services they provide. Another tech solutionist idea is that everybody should have the choice of the algorithms they want to have deliver content to them. All of these are on the table, but it suggests that we are getting closer to a conception of the internet that doesn't treat these entities as specialized, distant, removed, but really embedded in our community and culture, closer to realizing what the people need out of these applications and not so much what these companies want. Thanks for your time.